The BYU Cougars finished up their regular season with a 10-2 record by virtue of a 30-18 victory over the Houston Cougars on Saturday night. Why does 10-2 feel so hollow for certain Cougar fans? We're to get into that more right now on Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get started today with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits, courtesy of FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to learn more now. All right, the BYU Cougars are 10-2 on the season after beating the Houston Cougars 30-18 on Saturday night. And just overall, my takeaways from this game, probably some of you are noticing this on YouTube. I'm coming to you from locations undisclosed. Okay, let's be real. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I hopped a red-eye flight after that game for BYU, and I'm down here going on a family cruise that's 18 months in the making. And the biggest thing to take away from that game for BYU Saturday night is a missed opportunity for BYU. They had the Big 12 title game right there within their grasp, and they were unable to seize it. Obviously, two ill-timed losses to Kansas and Arizona State the 2 weeks previous to the game against Houston doomed BYU's chances, because when you put the fate of your outcome, or I guess put the outcome of your fate, in the hands of others, well, you're tempting fate, and that's what happened. Is Kansas State was unable to upset Iowa State, and obviously Arizona State ran roughshod over Arizona in the Territorial Cup, thereby ensuring that those two will play for Big 12 supremacy this coming weekend in Arlington. And to say it's a disappointment, I don't think I'm putting it too lightly. Considering where BYU was at one point this season, 9-0 in the country, 9-0 on the season, 6th in the country according to the college football playoff rankings, it's a disappointing outcome for the BYU Cougars. There's just no if, and, or but about it. But the bigger thing here is BYU missed out on one of those things. It'll be a what if forever with regards to this team. What if BYU had not had that punt go off the helmet of Evan Johnson against Kansas? What if Jake Retzlaff hooks up with JoJo Phillips for the go-ahead touchdown against Arizona State? What if BYU is playing for Big 12 supremacy? And I can assure you, I know a number of you already had travel plans, had made arrangements, Airbnbs, hotels, flights, car rentals, the like, in Dallas, anticipating a chance to go watch BYU play at AT&T Stadium. And some of you may not be unable to break those, and you'll be traveling to Dallas without a game to attend. But I can assure you, I'm going on a cruise this week. Well, guess who also had plans to make a quick flight Saturday from Fort Lauderdale to Dallas if BYU would have made the title game? Hey, this guy right here. But last, it's not to be. And that's going to sting BYU fans. I trust me, my social media feeds are full of it. What a missed opportunity. I saw one person said, how could 10-2 feel so hollow for BYU? Well, when you look at where things were for BYU just 3 weeks ago, quite literally, BYU was 9-0, like I said. They were ranked 6th in the country, and it seemed like their world was out there for the taking for the Cougars. Well, 3 weeks later, BYU's on the outside looking in, and you can argue that BYU has got a playoff resume that rivals other teams who are 10-2, but we already have seen that the College Football Playoff Committee, for whatever reason, does not have interest in BYU, and that obviously is a bit of a bone to pick when it comes with BYU fans and them feeling like they're being spurned by the College Football Playoff Committee. You can feel all that. You can feel all that rage. I get all that. But I think more of it is just that the BYU football program, I'm talking members inside the program, coaches, administrators, and then you out there in Cougar Nation as fans, it's going to be one of those gigantic what ifs. What if BYU would have been able to handle their business and not had some of these plays go against them at the worst time possible this year? It's going to sting, and I can understand the hurt, the angst, and the overall kind of tenor of where things stand, but I will also say this. I said it on our Locked On Cougars Twitter feed that I was on an overnight flight, a red-eye flight, and I couldn't sleep, so that was in and of itself, that was no bueno, because, going 24 hours without sleep, that's obviously not ideal, but alas, I got a DM on our Locked On Cougars Twitter feed from, I'm not going to out the person. I don't feel it's worth getting them in hot water. But they essentially, they said, hey, Jake, I feel like BYU needs to move on from Kalani Sitake. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is a guy who just put together a 10-2 overall record this season. His winning percentage over the past 5 seasons is at 71% in terms of his overall wins at 44-18. Overall, for his 9 years at BYU, he's north of 60%. I think it's 62% in terms of his total win percentage on the year. He is a guy who has accomplished a lot for BYU. And I get that not all Cougar fans, I think the vast majority of you would tell this Cougar fan to, stuff it, but that's some of the stuff that's coming out here. You may want to think that BYU needs a new offensive coordinator. You may think that BYU needs to look at a quarterback. They need to hit the transfer portal for X, Y, and Z. All that is valid conversation, but this is going to be one of those things for the BYU football program that you're going to look at years down the line maybe and look back and say, you know what? BYU missed a major opportunity in 2024. What if they had done that? What if they had made the college football playoff? Could they have made that magical run 40 years after the fact that BYU won their national title? Could they have done all that? And that's going to sting, and that's going to stick in the craw of a bunch of Cougar fans, and I completely understand it. You saw the team. They played poorly after halftime, after they found out they had officially been eliminated from the Big 12 title game. There is just no doubt about it. Kalani Sitake said it after the game that the guys slumped a little bit, and that's disappointing in of itself, that they were unable to kind of keep up the mojo despite being eliminated from the Big 12 title game, but it's also human nature. We all know that. When the factor of disappointment comes in, well, guess what? A slip is going to be inevitable, it feels like, to some level. And it's I can commiserate with the players because they worked hard, they worked long hours, they have spent months and months and months preparing for moments like this. And to let those 2 games slip when they slipped, the worst timing you probably could have asked for when it comes to BYU hoping to keep their playoff hopes alive, keep the Big 12 title game hopes alive, and it is what it is. So there's a gigantic what if hanging over this team, but if you can separate yourself from the disappointment of the fact that they did drop that game, I still think that BYU accomplished something that we should absolutely be celebrating when it comes to how the season has gone overall. And we'll delve into why, and we'll get to that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Better Together. Now, a lot of you like to play daily fantasy sports, but wouldn't it make it more fun if you were able to, actually connect with a friend of your family member of yours and have some fun along the way? That's where our good friends at Better Together come in. What they want to do is they are the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent, and you can win with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and then climb the leaderboard together. Grab a friend and join the social DFS movement and have some fun along the way. The best part is it provides a sense of camaraderie. A lot of you may be separated from friends that you want to talk to about these sporting events and you want to stay connected. Well, this is a way to do that. Also, is a great way to make you realize that DFS can be fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's better with your friends, and always put your group chat to the test and let you prove that yours is the best, and you can always stay on top of things with our friends at Better Together. So download Better Together today and have some fun with the app. All you got to do is use the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up and play for up to $1,000 in prizes with everybody else in that Better Together feature they're putting together for this coming weekend. So once again, that is Better Together. Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up. And as always, it seems to be fun when you're alone, but it's always better together. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. Thank you for bearing with us on this special edition, live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, edition of the podcast. I'm Jake Hatch. All right, so I mentioned the fact that BYU, there's one thing I think we're overlooking when it comes to the BYU football season the regular season is at its end, and that is, can we accept the fact that this was a successful year? In fact, I would argue an ultra-successful year for the BYU football program. Whoa, Jake, what are you talking about, man? Okay, let's take a step back. If you can divorce yourself from the disappointment in the moment of missing out on the Big 12 title game, consider where BYU is at the end of last season, same time last year. They had just come off a 7th straight loss, a double overtime heartbreaker to Oklahoma State to finish the season 5-7 and not go bowling. That was an absolute heartbreaker, and BYU is down in the dumps. I spent a large portion of the offseason talking about the fact that I felt like, okay, the over-under win total for BYU came out at 4.5. Okay, you get to 5 wins, that would match last year's total. My benchmark for success for BYU going into the season was 6-6. Those of you who are everydayers know that I was a broken record when I said that my benchmark for BYU was to go 6-6. And if they did, I'd consider it a successful year for BYU. Well, circumstances being what they were, when you start 9-0, there's a reframing of those expectations. And yes, they came up short in their pursuit of the Big 12 title game and ultimately a college football playoff berth, which they all aspired to have, speaking of members of the BYU football program. But if we can separate ourselves and divorce ourselves from that disappointment, didn't BYU overachieve wildly relative to expectations entering the season? Once again, that over-under win total, 4.5 wins. BYU, had you taken the over at 5 wins, well, guess what? They doubled that. They're 10-2. Let me remind you, there are very few teams who have double-digit win totals next to their name at this point in the season. There are 18, count them, 18 out of 134 FBS teams who have double-digit wins on the season at this point. BYU is ranked in the top 20 in the country, folks. I had some people say it feels disappointing that BYU finished 10-2. If 10-2 is a disappointment to you, really, outside of going and rooting for Nick Saban's Alabama squads, I'm not sure there's much else you can root for and feel content being disappointed with a 10-2 season. And I don't mean to knock you down, but come on. This is a BYU team that accomplished a ton. The other thing about it is, yes, they are losing some guys to graduation, likely some guys potentially will test the NFL draft waters out there. But let's also look at the fact that BYU has legitimate building blocks from which to build off of this season. Now, to build off of this, let's be real, you got to go 11-1, 12-0, you got to make the Big 12 title game. Like, there is very few steps beyond what BYU accomplished this year that they really would take the next step. But considering where BYU was just one season ago, when they were 5-7, down in the dumps, there were people out there saying that, does BYU actually have the depth to compete at this level? Have they bit off more than they can chew? And I could go back through my mentions if I really wanted to seek them out and talk about that. But I trust me when I say there were major conversations about BYU's inability to compete at the Big 12/Power 4 level, and those continued all the way through the off season, right up until training camp. And then when BYU started the season 9-0, I get at that point, like I said, there's a reframing of expectations, but I don't think you can consider anything other than this season being a success for the BYU football program. Yes, there's disappointment with regards to the Big 12 title game. That is one thing. Divorce yourself from that, like I said, and separate yourself from that. But consider in totality what BYU did this season, and I would argue it's an ultra successful year for the BYU football program. Yes, there is much to build on. There's much to improve upon. Like I said, you may want changes with the coaching staff. You may want changes with certain player personnel. All that is valid, and we'll have those conversations in days to come. But you do not throw back a 10-win season if you're the BYU football program. You can consider it to be a disappointment. I would tell you that's foolhardy to consider that to be a disappointment. Considering where BYU has been, they are in a very, very good spot. I would also add this. LaVell Edwards has a national championship. He won 257 games as BYU's legendary all-time winningest coach. I think is he still top 10 in the all-time wins category when it comes to college football? That's impressive stuff. Bronco Mendenhall, he had 99 wins, and it was at 10 or 11 seasons. The average darn near 9 or 10 wins a season, his entire run, decade-long run plus at BYU. Ultra successful coaches, speaking of Bronco Mendenhall, and particularly LaVell Edwards. I would say this. Kalani Sitake has faced top to bottom better opposition every single season at BYU, particularly the last two as members of the Big 12 Conference, than Bronco and or LaVell ever faced in a given season. BYU has never played 10 Power 5 teams in back-to-back seasons ever in their program's history, and they just did the last two seasons. Last year, 5 wins. You doubled that this year to 10 wins. Is that not the definition of success? Is that the definition of taking like leaps and bounds forward as a football program? If it's not, like I said, you may want to look at something else because you're going to be severely disappointed if, like I said, a 10-2 record at this juncture, year 2 in the Power 5, or I should say the Power 4 ranks for the BYU football program, if that's a disappointment to you, man, you have some very, very high expectations for this BYU squad, and I just frankly don't know if that BYU can ultimately live up to your expectations if that is indeed the case of what you believe is your expectation level. That seems like you're setting the bar way too high. Could I be wrong about that? Absolutely. And I welcome any and all feedback. And if you want to argue with me, feel free. I appreciate any and all feedback, banter and the like, unless it turns personal. You go at me personally, that's when I'm like, okay, yeah, we're out. We're done with this. But I just look at this and say that, can you consider anything else that BYU accomplished here other than a success? Yes, I can understand that you're disappointed that they came up short in their pursuit of that Big 12 title game. But where BYU was literally 12 months ago this time last year and where they're at right now, it is a night and day difference. I can tell you that BYU is in a far, far better spot right now than they were a season ago. And that should be celebrated. That should be something that BYU fans, you should be able to say, you know what? In retrospect, BYU did what I would hope they could have done. I would argue that any one of you going into the season, had I said, okay, at the end of the year, BYU is going to be 10-2, will you take that record right now? I would say that 99.9% of you hands would have shot up and said, give it to me, Jake. I will take that right now. So I get that when you consider how things went, when you lose at an inopportune time in back-to-back games that cost you a Big 12 title game appearance, I get that disappointment obviously filters in. But, man, it has been a really, really, I think, impressive season for BYU. And Kalani Sitake, Roderick, Jay Hill, and the rest of the BYU coaching staff, they have a lot to build from here. They show that they have adequate depth. They show that the recruiting efforts have paid off. They've got a lot of young, promising players in this program to build with over the next couple of years. Now, transfer portal, all that type of stuff could eat into that, but the fact of the matter is where BYU sits right now, juxtaposed with where they were a season ago, I don't think you can argue anything other than it being a major success for BYU this season. But like I said, I welcome any and all feedback. Now, there is one thing that I think BYU still needs to prove to really, I think, get people off their back when it comes to what they want to accomplish this season. I think it would be a fitting end to what I consider to be a successful year for BYU. What does it need to be? What do they need to do? We'll delve into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is here for you guys having fun this NFL season. You can get in all the action with FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, you can start with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits with our friends over at FanDuel. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com to sign up today. When you're in the middle of a game, you got the hunch that, hey, maybe I want to take advantage of what they've got out there with our friends at FanDuel. They got a super simple and easy-to-use app. You can see live play-by-play, all the latest stats, all on the same page where you're placing the literal bet that you're looking to place with our friends at FanDuel. Once again, you'll start with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It's as simple as that. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today and take advantage of this offer. It's all courtesy. Never, by the way, never waste a hunch and make it every moment more with FanDuel, as they are an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group today and be a part of being in the know when it comes to all things BYU sports with myself, sending you text messages with all the insider intel that you crave. You can sign up today for a 14-day free trial before you're charged anything. The best part is, like I said, it's text messages. You're not having to go to a message board or having to log into a website to get the insider information that you crave. It literally comes to your phone in the form of a text message. It's not much more direct than that. You also can have one-on-one conversations with myself via text on that. Once again, you get a 14-day free trial. All you got to do is click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching this or listening to it, wherever you get your podcast. Join us today. That's the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, and hopefully many more of you will be joining us in the coming days and weeks. We've got a really, really lively group right now. All right, before we go on today's show, I mentioned there's one thing I think BYU needs to do when it comes to the postseason I think would put a fitting end to this season for the Cougars. It is the BYU, no matter where they go bowling. They could end up in the Alamo Bowl, playing in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio on December 28th. They could end up in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. There's the Texas Bowl. There's a bevy of different bowl options out there for BYU. But the fact that they're 10-2 and likely to be a top 20 at worst program when it comes to the college football playoff rankings, BYU needs to go out and win their bowl game, or at least put in a monumental effort. This would be a disappointing, and you want to talk about disappointment. My disappointment level with BYU would be disappointing if they go to this bowl game and essentially roll over and play dead. I want BYU to go to this bowl game, hair on fire, upset about the fact that they screwed up on their opportunity to go to the Big 12 title game, and go out there and stomp whoever they play. Now, there's some talk about them playing in the Alamo Bowl against Colorado. Coach Prime, Shedeur Sanders, potentially the Heisman Trophy winner, and Travis Hunter in that game. That would be a made-for-TV event outside of the college football playoff that might be the biggest bowl game of the year. Some of you have asked me, because I've already mentioned it on social media, how that would happen. Well, let me school you to the game for a minute. The Pac-12 teams, after they left the conference, they still had bowl tie-ins that were contractually obligated to the Pac-12. Well, while those still play out, the old Pac-12 schools are still tied to those bowl games. Traditionally, the Pac-12 runner-up and the Big 12 runner-up would play in the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio. Well, considering BYU and Colorado, an old Pac-12 school, both could be, quote, runners-up in the Big 12, you could very likely see those two programs playing in the Alamo Bowl together. Now, Iowa State could throw a wrench in that if they were to lose to Arizona State or vice versa. But I think the fact that this could be a made-for-TV event, two strong fan bases that like to travel, obviously the glitz and glamour of Coach Prime, Shedeur Sanders, also Travis Hunter, if he has a Heisman Trophy in tow, that's going to be absolutely incredible. And everybody out there in sports entertainment, notwithstanding Utah fans saying that this doesn't exist, love the fact that BYU fans show up en masse wherever BYU plays. No, they're not handing out tickets at the Stake Center saying, hey, you guys need to go to the game. That's not a thing. There are BYU fans literally living everywhere in the country, especially if it would say in San Antonio, the local BYU fans down there would show up, but there'd be thousands upon thousands who would travel from literally all corners of this country to watch BYU play in this bowl game. Their disappointment of the the Big 12 championship notwithstanding. I could see that be a major bowl game. But the bigger point I want to make here is BYU needs to go out there and win that game. Or if they don't, they got to put on a monumental effort. If they lose by one in a shootout, let's say it's like 45-44, I think BYU fans could be content with how BYU performed in that circumstance, even if they lost the game. But they do not, and I will not accept BYU going out there and half-you-know-whatting this type of a game. If you want to legitimize yourself in the eyes of many, and I would include myself in this conversation, if you want to legitimize yourself, finish the season 11-2 and show that you have that fight, have that heart, have that dog in you that wants to go out there and win. Don't let it be a malaise of a postseason, that shows that you guys were disappointed and you essentially gave up on the year. That would be the wrong way, the absolute wrong way for the season to end for the BYU football program. I've got faith that BYU can get the job done. I hope they do, because I think guys like Connor Pay, Chase Roberts, Darius Lassiter, on down the list, Braden Keim, Caleb Etienne, these are all guys who want to go out on a positive note. Obviously got a positive note with regards to senior day and celebrating their final game at LaVell Edwards Stadium, but you do not want to go into the postseason and essentially be the dog that gets kicked by your opponent. You want to be the one doing the kicking, and you want to win that game because, like I said, I think it would put a fitting cap on the season for BYU if you go out there and win this football game. If you lose it, there's going to be a lot of fans saying, see, you know what? They lost 3 or 4 down the stretch. They don't have the fight in them. They petered out right when it really mattered the most. And that would be the disappointing part about this, is you would legitimize a bunch of the people who are the naysayers out there about this program in being right in their assessment. That would be tough to stomach, speaking from the BYU football perspective on that matter. So BYU, if I could speak to the players, I would tell them, work your you-know-what's off and win this football game. Get yourself healthy. You got 3-4 weeks at least, because it's going to be a post-Christmas bowl game. Gone are the years of BYU playing in the New Mexico Bowl, no matter if you were 6-6 or 9-3 in Independence. There are legitimate bowl games tied to the Big 12 that have bigger paydays than BYU's ever seen in a bowl game, have more cachet, are post-Christmas bowl games and the like. And if that's something you're into, well, you're in luck, because that's what BYU's in store for with regards to their postseason hopes this year. So I'm very interested to see how things go for BYU, but I think it would be a major disappointment if BYU were to go out there and lay an egg in their bowl game. I'd much rather they go and show what they're capable of, because I think that is the right way to put a cap on the season. I think keep Cougar fans a little happier, make them actually, not keep them, but make them a little bit happier about how things ultimately transpired this year. Would it be the perfect end of the season? Probably not, because the perfect end would have been, lifting a national championship trophy. That's the dream scenario, and that only happens for one team. But you have to make the best of the situation that you're in, speaking for BYU football at the moment. And I think that they got to go out there and prove that they have that fight, that heart. Like I said, they got that dog in them to go out there and fight, scratch and claw, and find a way to win this football game, no matter who it's against or where it's at. I know that travel's a part of it, and you can get caught up in all of the hoopla with regards to the bowl events and that type of stuff, and can distract you from the game at hand. Focus on the game. Business trip, handle it, win the game, and put your season on ice with an 11-2 record. And for the guys sticking around for BYU after that, use it as a springboard to get even better for next year. I think it's an important thing for BYU to go out there and put on a good performance in this bowl game, and we'll see if it ultimately transpires that way, and we'll have more for you guys in coming days when we finally find out where BYU will be playing in the postseason. All right, so that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Cougars. Once again, thank you for bearing with the technical difficulties. There's a little different backdrop, obviously, video, that type of stuff, but thank you all the same for your guys' support of the podcast, as always. Hope you guys have a fantastic day whenever you hear this. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day, and as always, thank you for being a part of it right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.